Thank you for joining Wars of the Roses. And this is Masonic Cipher Message from the Encyclopedia of Freemasonry by Albert G. Mackey. Masonic Cipher Message. At Cawnpore, India in July 1857 occurred the massacre of hundreds of men, women and children. Of this butchery, there is a pathetic record in the message of a Masonic character that was written on the wall of the Chamber of Blood. This inscription, appearing in a recent issue of the Controlling Officer's Journal, was reprinted in the Transactions, Leicester Lodge of Research, 1912 and 1913, page 107. And as the Masonic cipher was not understood, an invitation was extended the craft to submit a clue to its meaning. See cipher writing. Brother W. John Songhurst offered in reply the comment that the reproduction corresponded fairly with a photograph in his possession. But there were one or two small differences proving that they were not taken direct from the same original. For instance, the photograph shows that a blot had been erased at the word hands, and that an alteration had been made at the word post, which looks as though it had been first written past. It is headed, "The Writing on the Wall in Sir H. Wheeler's Room." Brother Songhurst had been able to trace other copies, all having many features in common, but none corresponding exactly, and with some the differences are important. He proceeded in Transactions, 1913 and 1914, page 76 through 83, to discuss the circumstances thus. At the outbreak of the mutiny in May 1857, Major General Sir Hugh Wheeler was in command of the Cawnpore Division of the Indian Army. He at once ordered entrenchments to be constructed, and by the 21st of May, these were occupied by the women and non-combatants. It is stated that there were about 1,000 Europeans in the town, of whom more than half were women and children. In a letter written by General Wheeler on the 1st of June, he says, "I have left my house and am residing day and night in my tent. On the 6th of June, the siege commenced, and the defenders gallantly held out for 3 weeks. The attack was led by the adopted son of the former chief of the Marathas, known in history as Nana Sahib, whose claims to succession the British government had refused to recognize. General Wheeler had with him his wife, who was of mixed blood, his son and 2 daughters. The son, Lieutenant Wheeler, was his aide-de-camp, and being severely wounded during the siege, he was carried to a room in the barracks. Here, in the presence of the whole family, father, mother and sisters, he was killed by a cannonball, which entering the building took off his head. Message in Masonic cipher from the Cawnpore Indian Massacre. On the 26th of June, Captain Moore, Captain Whiting and Mr. Roach, the postmaster, went from the trenches to arrange for capitulation and eventually received the promise of safe conduct for all to Allahabad. Preparations were quickly made. Sepoys accompanied the fugitives to the banks of the river, but even before all were embarked in the boats, a murderous musket fire was opened upon them, and according to one account, only 4 men escaped. It seems certain that General Wheeler, his wife and elder daughter were among the killed. About 125 women and children were carried back to Cawnpore, including the general's youngest daughter, who was taken by one of Nana's troopers, some say by Nana himself, and died a natural death in Nepal some years afterwards. The others were put into 2 rooms about 20 feet by 10 feet each in a small building formerly occupied by a native clerk close to Nana's house. Meanwhile, General Havelock was hurrying to the relief. He arrived on the 16th of July only to find that all the prisoners had been massacred by Nana's orders and hurled dead and dying into a well. Sir George Trevelyan, in his Cawnpore, published in 1865, says that this took place within call of the theatre, the assembly rooms and the Masonic Lodge. Other accounts from which I have taken these particulars are The Story of Cawnpore, London, 1859 by Captain Mowbray Thompson, and a personal narrative of the outbreak and massacre at Cawnpore, Lucknow, 1879 by W.J. Shepherd. Both of these men escaped from the garrison. Thompson swam from the boats and managed to land lower down the river. Shepherd went out disguised during the siege and was not able to return until after Havelock's occupation of the town. The cipher inscription is not mentioned in either of these narratives, but Shepherd says that during the siege both he and Captain Seppings wrote messages upon the walls of the barracks in pencil. There were 2 barracks within the entrenchments. One is described as the thatched barrack, and it was burned down by the rebels. The other was called the Masonry Barrack or the Flat-Roofed Barrack, and it seems that it was in this building General Wheeler had his quarters and in which his son was killed. Seppings was also in the Masonry Barrack and wrote as follows. The following were in this barrack on the 11th of June, 1857. Captain Seppings, Mrs. Ditto, 3 children, Mrs. Wainwright, Ditto infant, Mr. Cripps, Mrs. Halliday. Shepherd's inscription in the thatched barrack was, "Should this meet the eyes of any who are acquainted with us, in case we are all destroyed, be it known to them that we occupied this room for 8 days under circumstances so distressing as have no precedent. The destruction of Jerusalem could not have been attended with distress as severe as we have experienced in so short a time. W.J. Shepherd, wounded in the back. His wife and 2 children, Rebecca and her infant Elnalina Martha, old Mrs. Frost, Mrs. Osborne, Daniel, the Couronnee, Conductor Bethel, his wife and daughter, together with other friends. The 11th of June, 1857. The writing in cipher was first brought to Masonic notice in May 1862 by a copy in the Indian Freemason's Friend, the correspondent asking if any reader could furnish an explanation. This brought a letter signed Tatnai, dated from Lucknow, the 27th of July, in which it is said that the inscription is, in many parts, a string of characters devoid of significance. This fact Tatnai attributes to errors made by the original writer, to errors made by the copyist, and to chips of whitewash having fallen from the wall before the copy was made. He then gives the cipher portion of the writing as it had appeared in the journal and adds a suggested restoration. The letter mentions the few lines signed by J.W. Roche just above R.A.B. Johnston, written in plain English, and says that these include the words nasty wound, which in a copy of his possession were written mortally wounded. These particulars about Roche, called also Roach and Roach, do not appear in the photograph, but we find them in a copy made by R. Mackey of the O and R Railway, dated the 20th of July, 1887. Shepherd mentions that Roche had been wounded 4 times in the entrenchments, but they were only flesh wounds. He was killed on 27th of June. The same journal also printed a translation of the cipher made by Colonel E.K. Money, which is as follows. Dear Jesus, send his help soon and deliver us not into the enemy's hands. The general's daughter is in this corner. May God reward them according to the bloody deeds done to this innocent girl. This is the corner General Wheeler occupied in his distress. The general's wife is in this corner, the PM in this. This is the place where 2 soldiers, unintelligible, remember the innocent. As both of the general's daughters survived the siege, there must be some mistake in this translation, on which a critic, possibly Tatnai himself, writes, Colonel Money has misinterpreted the gender of the symbol. It was the general's son who was wounded when a cannonball, in passing through the room, carried away the head of Lieutenant Wheeler in the presence of his parents and sisters. Colonel Mowbray Thompson states this, and Colonel Williams, the Special Commissioner, states that Lady Wheeler and her 2 daughters were brought down to the Gort on an elephant. One of the daughters was carried away by a sawa. The remark, unintelligible, must refer to the spot where the 2 soldiers laid Lieutenant Wheeler down. Mr. Shepherd says that the 2 daughters occupied the adjoining room when he saw the general on the 24th of June, 1887. I have mentioned that Mackey's printed leaflet is dated July 1887. It purports to have been copied by W.J. Shepherd in July 1857, and it contains the following, which I have not found elsewhere, though in part it is referred to by Tatnai. T.W. Roach, wounded in right foot, shin bone fractured by shell, kneecap fractured, musket shot behind, nasty wound, musket shot in right breast. The 17th of June, 1857, Adjutant Halliday, 56th N.I., killed by a round shot, the 9th of June, 1857. Only 3 lines of cipher are given, and these, with all else which could not be printed in type, are inserted with pen and ink. Some notes are added, but they are not reliable as they contain, for instance, the statement that the translation by Colonel Money appeared in the Masonic Herald for 1858, while as a matter of fact that periodical was not in existence until about 1870. And as I have said, the translation was printed in the Indian Freemason's Friend in 1862. While I cannot say that I'm satisfied with Colonel Money's translation, I am not able to supply another. The absence of the original writing or an authoritative copy renders any serious attempt at deciphering practically impossible. We do not even know for certain where it was written. If, as seems most likely, it was on a wall in the thatched barrack, it could scarcely have referred to General Wheeler and his family, and we know that this building was burned during the siege, while the masonry barrack in which General Wheeler had his quarters was destroyed soon after Havelock's entry. Tatnai, writing within 5 years of the massacre, says that the building was not then in existence, and his suggestion is that the writer had concealed something in a certain place and hoped that after his death some brother might be able to recover it. There were 2 English lodges at Cawnpore at the time, Sincerity, constituted in 1819 and erased in 1858, and Harmony, constituted in 1836, which still exists as number 438. It seems likely that Johnston may have been the master of Sincerity, but unfortunately no names were registered at Grand Lodge after 1845. Shepherd mentions a Mr. A.R. Johnston of the E.I. Railway, who, with his wife and children, was killed during the siege. James Williamson Roach, postmaster, was initiated in Harmony in December 1806, and his is the only name I am able to trace in the lists at Freemasons' Hall. It is quite possible that the brother who wrote the cipher was a Scotch Mason. The device at the head undoubtedly indicates the Red Cross of Babylon, which the second line ends with letters referring to the same degree, Red Cross Knight, and one would not expect this to have been put forward prominently in an English lodge at so late a date. On the other hand, a Scotch master would probably have been described as RWM. The interlaced triangles, which appear sometimes at the foot and sometimes in the center of the copies, may be taken as referring to the Royal Arch, but it is not impossible that they may also indicate the key to the cipher. Colonel Money's translation seems to imply that the prayer was also written in cipher, while Macree's version points to a sense of inscriptions in the form of a diary or record of events during the siege, and Shepherd's statements rather bear out this view. It may be merely a coincidence that on the 17th of June, the date given on the photograph, a daughter of Shepherd was killed by a chance musket shot. If Colonel Money was right in his translation of daughter, there is just a possibility that this is the incident referred to. In any case, it seems that the mystery will not be cleared up unless and until we have before us a correct copy of the writing. As it originally appeared, only one thing can be stated with certainty, that it had no reference whatever to either of the 2 massacres, but to occurrences which took place before the attempted escape by the boats. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to share, like, subscribe and comment, and if you can, please consider donating to Wars of the Roses. Links to PayPal and Patreon are in the description. Thank you so very much.